Hey kids, it's Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I am your host, Dr. Michael Lennox, coming at you for the week of June 20th through 26th. As ever, we're going to talk about the astrology for the week, do a little dream interpretation at the end, and try to make sense of all of this craziness. So, Zoe, quite a rough full moon last week, was it not?
Yes, very much so. Like leading up to it and during, not just day of,
Yeah,
day after.
right.
4 days leading up to it as well. It was rough.
Well, me too. Me too. It was not my favorite week. Valuable,
Valuable.
but difficult. And you and I have, and just for the listening audience, Zoe and I talked about what we were going through, just sort of in our friendship connection during the week because we were both going through it. You and I, Zoe, we have, as you, I'm sure, will not surprise you, we have a lot of connections that are reflected in our charts. And there's one that's really powerful, which actually puts you and I on a similar rhythm of intensity if these points are triggered at the same time as they are in this particular full moon.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most sensitive oppositions in any chart is the rising sign and its opposite point, the descendant. So the ascendant and the descendant, which is how you show up in the world, how people see you. That's the rising, and the descendant is the opposite, like how you move towards others, what you're attracted to, and how you relate to others. Then another powerful opposition in any chart is the nodes of the moon, where the south node is the past and the north node is the dharmic destiny, the life purpose. And you and I share these points. My rising sign and your north node are within 2 degrees away from each other in the sign of Sagittarius. And your south node, your karmic past, and my descendant are in, this 2-degree tight conjunction. This particular full moon happened right on top of both my rising sign and your north node.
Sagittarius.
So in the scope of lunations of the year, sweetie, this was big for both of us. For me, it was an emphasis on literal relationships and the identity that I have in the world, both as Dr. Michael Lennox, but also as Michael, right? And for you, it was about life purpose, dharma, destiny, and relationships, because the north node of the moon, dharma, destiny, is also a function of how we relate to others. So you and I were both a little bit in a crazy amount of healing release because we had Mars and Chiron coming together as part of that, creating. Well, I'll tell you this in advance, and you can listen to the podcast of the last couple of weeks, kids, if you don't think I was right. I think I emphasized the power of the healing that was possible.
You did, yeah.
I think I undersold it. And we're in the wrap-up of that, right? So we get to wrap this up in the next week, so.
Thank God, because valuable, and I feel like we need release, right? You need sadness, you need process in order to be moving forward. You need it. And it's not the best feeling.
And there was a lot of it.
Right. And I think it's funny because obviously I listen to the podcast every week, but I texted you like, hey, so like I know some stuff is going on, but why is this so ridiculous right now? Why is this so rough?
I want to say something about that because you brought up sadness, and I had a lot of sadness. And one of the reasons why I didn't emphasize in advance of this full moon a level of emotional, depth that it contained was because there's no water in the atmosphere. So there isn't a direct astrological corollary for me to say, and it's going to be very emotional. Of course, we don't need planets or the moon in a water sign to be emotional as human beings. It's a deep part of our experience. But I didn't speak into it in advance.
My personal ecosystem has a lot of water.
Exactly, exactly. We all have a lot of water, both literally and archetypally. And we are in an integration week, right? I mean, other than the fact that we have the solstice to move through, but the solstice is not a transit.
Hmm.
And I'll explain what I mean by that later on in the podcast. So even though it's a big week for that experience of the summer solstice in the north, winter in the south, it's not an energy we have to grapple with in the same way that a transit, between planets or a full moon or new moon is. So it is a week of integration. And we're still moving through a period of time where all the personal planets are in their ruling signs for these couple of days in the first 4 days of the week. And that's going to help us integrate. And I'll talk about what that means in just a moment. So, when the personal planets out there cosmically are traveling through a sign that they are in rulership of, the quality or the human experience that that planet reflects is operating at its sort of highest level. So, when Mars is in Aries, our decision making is clearer, more precise, more definitive, more trustable, because Mars, the decision making planet, is at home in Aries. The fire of Aries and the fire of moving the body through space is in perfect alignment. And so for the entire month of June, Mars is in Aries, and that allows us, speaking of integration, to integrate into our bodies the things that we're learning emotionally and mentally, because the body planet is operating well because he's in his home sign territory. Venus rules two signs. She rules Libra and Taurus. So when she's in either one of those signs, how we're processing our emotions is more efficient because she's at home. And in Taurus, where she is now, that's a real embodiment sign. That is, Taurus is physical, it's an earth sign. So you can think of Venus as being the planet of our emotional body, and our connection to love is more self directed in Taurus and more other directed in Libra, because Libra's the sign that invented relationships. So if we were moving through a passage where Venus was in Libra, we'd still be in a rulership moment of greater sort of connection to emotions in an efficient way, but we'd be focusing our emotional and love energy towards others. Venus in Taurus is very much about the sensuality of our feelings. Certainly, a full moon that knocked you and I both on our emotional ass, even with no water in the atmosphere, was more emotional, perhaps. The energy was more emotionally felt by us
Mhm.
because the planet that reflects our emotional experience was at home in grounded Taurus. So it's like, yeah, throw the feelings on, baby. I'm at home in Taurus. I'll give you all the feels. So, at least for the first 4 days of this week, we're still in a place where mind, body, and heart are all in a more organic placement for us to understand our thoughts in a precise kind of way, Mercury and Gemini, process our feelings, our emotions, and how we give and receive love in a grounded and loving way, Venus and Taurus, and make decisions from a place that is natural, where masculine principle wants to be sort of put into play. This will help integration, whatever that winds up meaning for you. We all have different things that we're integrating and working on, but the full moon of last week opened up a boatload of healing possibilities. And we're in a couple of days of quietude, which will allow us to just sort of get our ducks back in a row, get our mind a little quieter, our hearts a little like less tender, and our movement, our actions, and our decisions coming from a less intensified place.
Oof.
So the one change in this happens Thursday when the planet Venus moves out of Taurus and into Gemini. Venus spends about 3.5 weeks in each sign that she moves through. So for the next 3.5 weeks, we have a different quality to the way we process our feelings and the way we approach intimacy and romance and finances. I have a tendency to forget to talk about Venus's relationship with finances. Personally, I just have a relaxed relationship with money and flow of money. I've always had that, whether I had money or didn't. I've always had a nice organic appreciation for that money just flows. Even when I was your age, and all my friends would complain about things like, I saved all of this money and then my tires blew out, or I suddenly had $500
Classic.
in the bank and I needed a root canal. When I was 25, I wasn't complaining about that. I was astonished that every time I needed money, I had it. And that was blatantly
Mm.
obvious to me.
Hmm.
And it was just the beginnings of my conscious awareness of how life works.
Abundance consciousness.
Yeah. So I forget to sometimes talk about that Venus rules our finances. Why? Because money is a feminine principle.
Hmm.
Mars says, if you have something that I want, I'm just going to take it. And Mars in Aries right now is like all about it, man. Right? I'll take what I want, take what I need without asking. Venus comes along and says, no, 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 back up, Mars. You can have anything you desire if you ask and if you're willing to exchange for it. So,
Hmm.
money as a consciousness is a feminine principle. So, Venus is the planet that reflects our money consciousness. So, something that happens this week on Thursday is how we relate to love, emotions, and money moves into the sign of Gemini, where we have a more intellectual understanding of our feelings. Our intimacy experience becomes a little bit more about words and connecting. And in terms of money consciousness, Venus and Gemini is probably a little scattered when it comes to having grounded approach to how you view the flow of money.
Hmm.
The beauty of Venus and Gemini at a moment when emotions are raw and healing is rich and feelings are ripe because emotions are raw and healing is happening. Thank you, Mars and Chiron, and a full moon of last week. Once Venus moves into Gemini on Thursday, we are going to have an easier ability to understand the feelings that we're having because the feeling planet is in an intellectually based sign. So the value of 3.5 weeks of Venus in Gemini from the perspective of being in all of that watery emotion that we each carry in our experience is that we will have an ability not only to understand our feelings better, but in terms of communicating with others when emotional stakes are high becomes easier with Venus in Gemini.
Hmm.
Love language is all about words of affirmation.
For
Now, each
Gemini.
individual will still have their right. Venus in Gemini implies that the way to open the heart is through words.
Ah.
Now, we all have Venus in whatever sign we have Venus in our natal charts, and that will establish, our individual love language, and that's never going to change.
Mhm.
Venus in Virgo is always going to be about acts of service. Venus in Leo, like I have, is always going to be about like affection and generosity. You want to get my love attention? Adore me a little. Give me a little bit of give my little Leo Venus some attention and I will open my everything to you. But for the universal sense of there's an energy that we all tap into collectively, the 3.5 weeks of Venus in Gemini says that the gestalty thing, the sort of the backdrop of love is more accessible through words than any other approach.
So when you said summer solstice, did you mean the summer starting or the peak of the summer? Because I am not ready for the peak of the summer. I just got used to it.
Get him!
I'm fresh in
No.
summer mode. So can we clarify that one?
Well, and we live in Southern California where it's, summer 3/4 of the year,
True, but it is now warmer than usual. Warmer than our normal warm. So I'm ready.
We are hitting the first day of summer on Tuesday, tomorrow. The
Got
solstice is
it.
tomorrow. But it's the first day of the season, not the middle of the season. Actually, it's a perfect segue to talk a little bit about what the solstices and the equinoxes are, why they're important, and to distinguish a little bit from what they are as compared to what we're mostly talking about in astrology, which is transits. So the solstices and the equinoxes are not transits. A transit would be two moving bodies through space having an angular relationship, but from the perspective of a third body that's watching it. So in this case, we'll talk about the full moon of last week. We're the stationary body that's looking up, and we're seeing two moving bodies, in this case, the sun and the moon, interacting in an angle, in this case, a 180-degree angle. That's a transit. So that everything I ever mention in astrology is a transit.
Mhm.
Transits provide the raw material energies with which we build our lives. The energy changes shape each day. So how we build our lives on one day is not going to be how we do it on another day. And this is the value of astrology. We help contextualize the energetic differences between May and June, or last week and this week. And what makes the difference are these transits, because transits have qualities of energetic, sensation, and then archetypal meaning that we also respond to. What I call the solstices and equinoxes are marker moments. They mark moments in our yearly experience of the earth moving around the sun.
It's more like a time chapter, right?
Kind of, kind of. Well, think about this. Way before civilization was really taking hold on the planet and human beings were gathering in sort of smaller enclaves, it was our relationship to the sun that gave us our first kind of connection to powers greater than ourselves.
Mhm.
It stands to reason. If you're, a human being and it was, 10,000 years ago, the sun would have been like a god to us. It would be natural to look up to the sky and be in awe of this thing, this burning bright light that is our sun. And that alone might have started up a kind of sacred relationship between us and the heavens. But then you have this thing about our solar system that seems kind of kooky in that it was the perfect storm to create a world on which seasons occur.
Hmm.
When the earth and the sun are in particular alignments, we have these 4 points. We call them world axis points in astrology, and they relate to 0 degrees of Aries, 0 degrees of Cancer, 0 degrees of Libra, and 0 degrees of Capricorn. Those 4 signs are also called the cardinal signs, and cardinal energy implies a beginning, a
Hmm.
startup. So I'll talk about the summer solstice, and we'll just start with that perspective because that's what we're in here in the Northern Hemisphere. So, what the summer solstice is that we are in a moment where those of us who live in the Northern Hemisphere are in an experience of the longest day, the most sunlight. So, we refer to the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere as the longest day because technically it is.
Mhm.
At that moment, when we hit the longest day, that we also declare that to be the startup of the season that we're entering, in this case, summer. One of the things that gets a lot of people confused about Western astrology is the idea that these placeholders that we describe, like 0 degrees of Aries, doesn't actually correlate with the constellation Aries up in the sky.
Hmm.
And so naysayers will be like, nah, astrology's bullshit because you think you're a Leo sun, but really that's not where the direction is anymore. And it's accurate. Because what Western astrology does is not concern itself with the constellations. In fact, the stories that make up the constellation characters' sort of archetypal nature are what the signs represent and aren't really connected to the stars that inspired the stories.
Hmm.
Because when the earth is aligned with the sun in such a way that the days and nights are of exact equal length, which is the spring equinox, we in Western astrology, we call that moment 0 degrees of Aries, the beginning of the solar year. So if you think that that is reflecting 0 degrees of Aries in the sky, it doesn't. But it's not about the constellations. It's not about those stars. It's about a trip of the Earth around the sun that takes 364 days and a little bit more, 364 and a quarter, that we start at the beginning. The beginning is physical in the solar system. It really is a day of equal length, night and day. And so that's our starting point, our alpha and omega. Then we move 3 months in time, where we are now, and the top of the earth is tilted towards the sun, the bottom is tilted away, and so the northern hemisphere has the longest day. And the southern hemisphere, for our folks down under, have the shortest day. And 6 weeks after, we get the beginning of fall, the other equal day moment, and then we get to the beginning of winter in the north is the beginning of summer in the south. But the real point I'm trying to make, if all of you are about to swerve off the road or fall asleep while you're listening to this podcast, the salient point I'm trying to make is these 4 world axis points in astrology that correlate with the beginning of the seasons, which allowed us as a human race to actually begin agriculture, which led to civilization. These 4 axis points were, for many First Nations communities around the world before civilization took hold, how we were divine, how we expressed our divine connection to the earth herself. I mean, the earth was our first goddess and the sun was our first god. And in the age of Taurus, 6,000 years ago, the age of Taurus would be an age where we honored the earth as a deity. Then we moved into the age of Aries, where we got the monotheistic God, then the age of Pisces, where we got the Christ consciousness, and now we're in the age of Aquarius, where we're going to try to fix all the problems of the last 4,000 years.
Of all those last 2 periods.
Right? Back at a time when we honored the earth as a deity and the sun as a sort of the father god, the solstices and equinoxes were the pillars of understanding how we relate to the system that is our home. One of the things that's really the right thing to do at such a moment, we don't honor as much at the summer solstice as we do in the winter solstice. Here's what I mean. When the day is the shortest and we are in the most darkness, the job at that marker moment is to remember the light within. This is gorgeous reason for Christmas trees and Hanukkah bushes and Kwanzaa candles, because we're creating a ritual expression of light and bounty. I mean, a Christmas tree is just a fruited tree giving birth to crops, but it's fake because it's dark. So we honor the light within. And that's what our friends are doing in Australia and New Zealand and all the folks down under right now. They are in their shortest day, their most darkness, and they do need to. You do, if you're listening from down under. This is the week to honor the light within because the light outside appears to be the least that's available. And we create a sense of harmony and balance by honoring the light within when we're in the winter solstice. Then it would stand to reason that the best way to honor the summer solstice is to take a moment and appreciate the shadow and the darkness at a moment when we're marinating in the most light.
What does that look like?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Because I feel like we know when it's winter, we're like, yeah, we light some candles. We, think about, I don't know, abundance. And I mean, you just laid it
Yeah,
out, but what
yeah,
does it
yeah.
mean to appreciate and look at the shadow while we're in the lightest period?
First of all, the reason we don't do more darkness work in the summer solstice is because we're in such celebration of the greatest light that from
Right.
spring into summer we are in celebration and enjoying the light. That's why I sort of jokingly said, well, I don't know, because in a way it doesn't lend itself to that. But we're living in a modern world where consciousness is greater than it has ever been before. And
Mm,
so, one of the things that reflects what I think I mean by appreciate the darkness and the shadow when the light is the greatest can be understood by this sort of image. At the equinoxes, it is easy to feel a balance between light and dark because our very days are an expression of equal amounts of light with equal amounts of dark. When the equinoxes come, my sort of ritual du jour would be a mandala, create a circular, creative, artistic expression of the sense of wholeness and balance that you either have or wish to embody. At the winter solstice, we light the light to remember the light. At the summer solstice, the best way for us to, to sort of have a sense of the wholeness that includes honoring the dark is to acknowledge that we are one community,
hmm.
that the age of Aquarius demands that we recognize a kind of global unity of consciousness. And so when we're in the summer solstice in the north and we have a moment where we remember, oh, wow, right. I live on this magnificent planet where half of the Mother Earth herself is pointed in the other direction. That as I'm experiencing the longest day, there's a whole swath of human beings experiencing the shortest day. And there's your balance and harmony. You have to stretch yourself a little bit to feel balance and harmony. So in the dark, we do it with light. I'm just suggesting that if you're drawn to me as a reflector or as a teacher, that I'm, letting you know that as we move through this celebration this week, that is, hooray, we're in the light. And isn't that wonderful that we remember to think of the whole, to appreciate the full expression of what the collective is on the planet, especially at a moment when polarization and divide is sort of ruining our experience of a harmonized collective. Anything that any of us can do energetically as a prayer, as an intention, is a powerful thing. And so I would invite anyone who's listening to this podcast, as we're enjoying the greater light in the north, that we remember that there's a whole swath of humanity experiencing the opposite. And just by appreciating that, I think that we contribute to the collective feeling a little bit more harmonized, unified, and balanced. Our relationship with sunlight is profound. It's something that is happening at the individual physical level. We all have this gland in the middle of our brain, the pineal gland, that is so sensitive to sunlight. It literally wakes us up when the sun comes up and puts us to sleep when the sun goes down, right? Because this gland is attuned to sunlight. This is why they tell you not to look at your phone late at night when you're trying to go sleep, because the light coming from the phone into your eyes is telling your pineal gland it's still bright daylight. Well, that same connection inside of us that regulates our sleeping and our waking and all kinds of cycles that our body feels is part of what's playing out in these solstice and equinox moments. I think one of the reasons why it can be powerful to celebrate the solstices and the equinoxes at the collective level is that this individual experience of being so connected to the sun is also something that we all share at the level of humanity.
Mm,
So at a
yeah.
moment on the planet when divide and polarization and I'm this way and you're bad and we should fight to the death because of that is rising up and threatening to sort of take the whole system down, the solstice tomorrow is a beautiful moment to remember that we are one. There is only one being of consciousness here. We are each individualized expressions of that.
Yeah.
And it's generated by the earth and the sun in their ongoing relationship that we call, that I call the mother, father, God consciousness. And the solstice moment is an opportunity for us to know that inside ourselves individually, but to also share that experience with others on the planet. And we can do that this week, starting tomorrow, by honoring the solstice. So have at it.
It's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
Let's talk about goats.
Goats, like as in bah?
Yeah. So Roseanne writes in, "Hi, Michael. Some background. I live in New York City, lifelong Manhattanite, so goats are not something I ever see in my reality, and there are no colorful rocks in my living room. Here's the dream. Very short, partly why I feel comfortable sharing it. Goats in my living room. I realize they have moved rocks around to create beautiful, colorful, circular stone patterns on the floor. Some with smiley faces, bright oranges, blues, yellows. I'm amazed that the goats knew how to do that and am afraid of messing them up. Kind of like those sand mandalas. I can't quite believe they were made to disappear, and I don't want them to. But I know that messing them up is inevitable. I accidentally lightly kick a rock or two out of its place as I walk around looking at them. I really want them to stay perfect, just as the goats made them, and I'm sad that they can't. Thank you for any insight. You're great, Roseanne."
Well, love that last little statement.
I know we're going to cover goat consciousness, right? Or goat
Yes, we
medicine.
are.
And okay, is goat medicine, I'm thinking about Capricorn, right? Is goat medicine what things you're building towards, or
Well, yes, certainly Capricorn is a goat.
right?
So while we're not really in this, for the sake of this conversation, talking about Capricorn consciousness, Capricorn is a goat for very specific energetic reasons. Their
Right.
ability to move in treacherous landscapes and stay sure footed is a goat connection to the Capricorn sense of, I will accomplish the goal and get to the top of the mountain no matter what, even if it's difficult to climb.
Mhm.
So the sure footedness of goats and their ability to climb mountains is part of their medicine. And here's what's really, I think, the salient piece for understanding goat medicine is the connection to the treacherousness. I mean,
Hmm.
have you ever seen videos of goats on impossible looking mountains?
Oh, I've seen them in Utah live on impossible
Oh my
looking
God, you
mountains.
have never seen that because it's just astonishing. Like, and listen, listeners, kiddos, if you haven't seen this, Google it because it's crazy to watch what it almost looks like a defying act to
Right.
stay, standing on these like cliffs. So that's the medicine of goat. At its fundamental level is the ability to maneuver in difficult sort of circumstances. Now, you could probably find lots of guardian spirit, goat consciousness in lots of different First Nations traditions. But let's just go, for the sake of this dream, with what we've already established, that we're talking about goats as a medicine that helps you navigate when life is difficult. And we might fall off a cliff at any given moment, which is certainly germane to just life on the planet today. Right?
Mhm.
We all need to be as sure-footed as possible because we are all standing on treacherous cliffs of consciousness. And one false move, we get, tripped up and we fall down the mountain. So in this case, the dreamer, Roseanne, is having a very personal experience of how she's navigating the treacherous elements of life, hence the goat medicine. But it starts with the goats being in her living room specifically. So in this dream, we are in consideration of the parts of Roseanne that she readily shares with others who are intimate in her circle.
Hmm.
We would allow anybody in our lives, even peripherally so, into our living room. So the consciousness, the symbol of living room is who we are personally, because it's part of our home, but it's the part of us that we share with other people. Where the kitchen is the home and the hearth, bathroom is individuation, bedroom is intimacy, living room is you and I are the same. If I go to the fundamental meaning of rocks, rocks are the earth's memory.
Hmm.
They are part of her organic nature. We grab one and we say, oh, this is a rock, but it's really just a part of the Great Mother. It's a piece of her. So if goats can climb mountains that are made of rocks, and that represents their ability to navigate a difficult world, the goats creating beautiful patterns of colorful placement is like a spiritually oriented approach to how to navigate treacherous territory. The goats come in and show her, here's how to do it. Here's what it looks like to be masterful and passionate, all the colors. One of the tragedies of the impermanence of the mandala is that it is such a stunning moment of expression that its temporality becomes something we object to. But the whole point of the mandala in sand is to represent the temporality of everything that happens, that we experience, that we wish could be solid. Wouldn't it be great if the spiritual energies that we were vibing with for a moment came into our living room and sort of gave us this perfect little design of here's how to navigate difficult territory and maintain passion and connection to, life force, all those colorful rocks. But it's not permanent. It's temporal. Like we'll get a message in a meditation and we want to hold on to it forever, but in fact, it's a passing thing. And we have to move inspired by certain moments without being attached to them staying exactly the way we want them. She does not want to disappear. In fact, she's afraid of messing them up, but she's supposed to. Like, how can you not? That's the point. The point of the dream is to allow the rocks to get kicked out of place and to move with the temporality of life.
Hmm.
When I'm typing notes, sometimes I'll do something that's noteworthy, like the last line of the dream. I all capped the really. I really want them to stay perfect. That's another salient message of this dream is that Roseanne wants things to be perfect in a rocky landscape. And it's like just as she gets all her ducks in a row, she's amazed, but she doesn't want to mess it up. She wants to be perfect, or she wants the message to stay perfect. One of the messages of this dream, in my perception of it, is the blessing has already been received. And the fear is, I'll fuck it up. And this is common. People fearfully worry that the blessing that they received or the lesson that they moved through won't support them. And so this is a dream that says the blessings are occurring, trust them. You don't actually have to keep it perfect in order to have inside of you a place where you are guided and helped and assisted. In fact, if I were doing a dream workshop where I sometimes will hear people's dreams, offer an interpretation, and then I'll give them an assignment, like a visual assignment, and then I'll take the group through a guided meditation, get them into a hypnotic state, and have them each sort of do the assignment visually. For Roseanne, it would be, I want you to go into that beautiful sort of like mandala of colored rocks in your living room and mess the whole thing up, just wreck it. She would do that, but in a hypnotic state, and something interesting would happen. It wouldn't be what she would typically expect. The unconscious would participate. But you understand the point I'm making is...
Like, then she sees how she would feel if she had done that.
That's right.
Got it. Yeah.
Yes. Because I think the message of the dream isn't about the goats or the colorful rocks. It's about the perfectionism of wanting things to stay exactly as they are, which is not how life works. And the goats are coming to say, look at the beauty. Look at what we can create. Look at what it is for you to steadfastly climb the mountaintop of your own consciousness. So that tells me that Roseanne's doing a bang-up job of climbing to the top of the mountain of her consciousness. And the dream is saying, careful of perfectionism, careful of wanting to control and navigate things that are not within your control, and allow for life to be messy.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.